6 months after his arrest, Marcus stood in the same square where his journey of transformation had begun. But this time, he wasn't the center of a scandal. He was simply one of many community volunteers helping to coordinate the annual memorial service for fallen soldiers. The changes in him were visible to everyone who had known him before. His expensive designer clothes had been replaced by simple, practical clothing suitable for manual labor. His arrogant posture had given way to a more humble bearing. Most importantly, his eyes held a depth of understanding and empathy that had never been there before. Elena Santos approached him as he finished arranging chairs for the families. The twins, Sophia and Carmen, had grown during the months Marcus had been serving, and they greeted him with the easy affection of children who considered him part of their extended family. "Mr. Sullivan," Elena said, using the formal address she had maintained throughout his service period. "I wanted to speak with you before the ceremony begins." Marcus felt a familiar, nervous flutter in his stomach. Despite all the progress he had made, he still struggled with the knowledge that nothing could truly undo the pain he had caused on that first day. "Mrs. Santos, whatever you need to tell me, I'm ready to hear it," he replied. Elena looked at him, carefully, seeing the genuine change that had occurred over the past months. "I want to thank you," she said softly. "Not for what you did 6 months ago, but for what you have become since then." Marcus felt tears welling up in his eyes. "Mrs. Santos, I don't deserve your thanks. I hurt you and your family. I disrespected Miguel's memory. I was horrible to you and everyone else in this community." "Yes, you were," Elena agreed, her honesty gentle but unflinching. "But Miguel always told me that people should be judged not by their worst moments, but by what they do after those moments. You have spent 6 months trying to make amends, not just through words but through service." She gestured toward the memorial where Marcus had spent countless hours carefully tending the flowers and cleaning each name with reverence. "You have learned to honor our fallen heroes properly. You have listened to our stories and carried our burdens. You have become someone Miguel would have respected." The ceremony began with Captain Rodriguez reading the names of the fallen soldiers. When he reached Sergeant Miguel Santos, Elena and her daughters stepped forward to place fresh flowers at the memorial. This time, Marcus watched from a respectful distance, understanding that some moments belong to family alone. After the formal ceremony, many families approached Marcus to thank him for his help over the past months. Mrs. Rodriguez hugged him and said her grief felt lighter knowing that someone truly understood the magnitude of her loss. Mr. Fernandez shook his hand and mentioned that the scholarship fund Marcus had helped organize was already providing opportunities for young people in their daughter's memory. Lieutenant Colonel Vega, who had been observing from the back of the crowd, approached Marcus as the gathering began to disperse. "Mr. Sullivan, your 6 months of service are officially complete. You're free to return to your life in America." The words hit Marcus unexpectedly hard. For months he had thought about returning home, but now the prospect felt strange and unsettling. What about the families? Who will help them with their weekly errands? Who will maintain the memorial garden? "Other volunteers will continue the work," she assured him. "You've helped train several community members in the maintenance routines. The support networks you helped strengthen will continue to function." Marcus nodded but felt a profound sense of loss. The work that had seemed like punishment at the beginning had become the most meaningful part of his life. For the first time ever, he had felt truly useful, not because of what he owned or controlled, but because of what he could give to others. That evening, Marcus sat in his simple quarters writing letters to his employees back home. He wanted to apologize personally to each person he had mistreated, but more importantly, he wanted to outline changes he planned to make in how his businesses operated. To Maria, the single mother he had fired for taking time off to care for her sick child, he wrote, "I was wrong to prioritize my convenience over your family's needs. If you're willing to return, I want to offer you your job back with full pay for the time you missed, plus a guarantee that family emergencies will always be accommodated." To his head chef, who had endured years of verbal abuse and impossible demands, he wrote, I've learned that leadership through fear creates resentment, not loyalty. I want to work with you to create a kitchen environment based on mutual respect and shared commitment to excellence. Each letter was difficult to write, because it required Marcus to confront specific instances of his past cruelty. But he had learned from Elena and the other military families that healing required acknowledgement of harm, not just generic apologies. Sarah arrived the day before Marcus was scheduled to leave. She had flown in to accompany him home, and he could see the uncertainty in her eyes as she tried to reconcile the man she was seeing with the husband she had known for 15 years. "You look different," she said as they sat together in a small cafe near the military base. "Older, maybe, but also, I don't know how to describe it. More real?" Marcus understood what she meant. The artificial confidence and aggressive posturing that had defined his personality for so long had been stripped away, revealing someone he was still getting to know himself. "I've been thinking about us," he said carefully. "About our marriage. I know I've been a terrible husband, selfish, controlling, dismissive of your feelings. I don't know if you can forgive me, but I want you to know that I understand now how much I've hurt you." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "Marcus, I've been waiting for years for you to see me as a person instead of just an accessory to your success. I almost left you 3 times, but I kept hoping you would change." "I can't promise that I'll be perfect," Marcus said. "But I can promise that I'll never again treat you like you exist solely for my benefit. You deserve a partner, not a boss." On his final morning in the country, Marcus visited Miguel's grave one last time. Elena had given him permission to go alone, understanding that he needed a private moment to say goodbye to the man whose memory had taught him so much about honor and sacrifice. He placed a small bouquet of flowers at the headstone and spoke quietly to Miguel as if he were still alive. "I'm sorry it took disrespecting your memory for me to learn how to be a decent person. I promise I'll try to live in a way that honors what you stood for. I'll try to serve others the way you did." As Marcus prepared to board the plane home, he carried with him more than just luggage. He carried the stories of families who had shown him grace he didn't deserve. He carried the example of a young soldier who had chosen courage over safety. Most importantly, he carried a completely different understanding of what it meant to be a man of worth. The businessman who returned to New York was fundamentally different from the one who had left 6 months earlier. Marcus Sullivan had learned that true strength came from lifting others up, not tearing them down. He had discovered that respect was earned through service, not demanded through intimidation. And he had finally understood that the most important measure of a person's life wasn't what they accumulated, but what they contributed to the world around them. The consequences of his arrogance had been severe, but they had also been transformative. In losing everything he thought mattered, Marcus had found everything that actually did. Marcus's first day of community service began at 5 in the morning with a wake-up call that shattered his usual routine of sleeping until 9. He was assigned to work with Corporal James Mitchell, a veteran who had lost his leg in combat and now coordinated support services for military families. "You'll start by helping me deliver care packages to families who have lost someone in the past year," Corporal Mitchell explained, as they loaded supplies into a military van. "These aren't photo opportunities or chances to feel good about yourself. These are real people dealing with real grief, and they deserve your respect and attention." Their first stop was a modest apartment where Elena Santos lived with her twin daughters, Sophia and Carmen. Marcus's hand shook as he carried a box of groceries to the door, knowing he was about to face the woman whose husband's memory he had disrespected. Elena opened the door and looked at Marcus with eyes that held sadness, but not hatred. She was younger than he had expected, probably in her late 20s, with dark hair pulled back and wearing a simple dress. Her daughters peeked out from behind her legs, curious about the strangers at their door. "Mr. Sullivan," she said quietly in accented English, "I was hoping we would meet properly." "Mrs. Santos, Marcus began, but found himself unable to complete the sentence. What words could possibly be adequate? "Come in," she said, stepping aside. The girls were just having breakfast. The apartment was small but immaculately clean, filled with photos of Miguel in various military settings. Marcus saw pictures of him with Elena on their wedding day, holding the twins as babies, and in combat gear with his fellow soldiers. Each image showed a man full of life and love, making his absence even more profound. Sophia and Carmen, now 5 years old, looked at Marcus with the frank curiosity of children. They were beautiful girls with their mother's dark eyes and their father's warm smile, completely unaware that this man had once treated their father's sacrifice as entertainment. "Are you here to help Mama?" Sophia asked in Spanish, which Elena translated yes. Marcus replied, his voice thick with emotion, "I'm here to help your mama however I can." Elena served him coffee and told him about Miguel, not the heroic version from official reports, but the personal details that made him real. How he sang silly songs to make the twins laugh. How he worried about Elena working too hard while he was deployed. How he dreamed of opening a small auto repair shop when his military service ended. "He was not perfect," Elena said with a sad smile. "He left his socks on the floor and ate too much ice cream. But he was good. He always tried to do what was right, even when it was difficult." As Marcus listened, he began to understand that he wasn't just learning about Miguel. He was discovering what it meant to be a decent human being. Miguel's goodness wasn't about grand gestures or public recognition. It was about consistently choosing to care for others, even in small everyday ways. Over the following weeks, Marcus's routine became focused entirely on service. He spent mornings helping maintain the memorial garden where Miguel's name was engraved, carefully tending to flowers and cleaning the stone markers. He spent afternoons visiting with military families, listening to their stories and helping with practical needs like grocery shopping or home repairs. The work was physically exhausting and emotionally draining. Marcus had never been the type to get his hands dirty, but now he found himself painting fences, moving furniture, and cleaning gutters for families who were struggling financially after losing their primary breadwinner. More challenging than the physical labor was learning to listen without trying to fix everything with money. Mrs. Rodriguez, who had lost her son just 6 months earlier, didn't need Marcus to solve her problems. She needed someone to sit with her while she cried and remember her boy's dream of becoming a teacher. Mr. and Mrs. Fernandez, whose daughter had died in a training accident, didn't want Marcus's business advice. They wanted help organizing a scholarship fund in her memory and someone who would attend the small ceremony they held each month at her grave. Gradually, Marcus began to understand the difference between charity and service. Charity was writing a check and feeling good about helping people. Service was showing up consistently, even when it was inconvenient or uncomfortable, and putting other people's needs before your own. The transformation wasn't instant or easy. Marcus caught himself several times falling back into old patterns, trying to take charge or suggest better ways of doing things. But Elena and the other families were patient with him, gently redirecting his energy toward actually listening and supporting, rather than leading and controlling. 2 months into his service, Marcus received a letter from his head chef back home. Business had improved significantly since Marcus left, the letter explained. Employees were happier, customers felt more welcome, and the restaurant had received several positive reviews praising the improved atmosphere. "It turns out," his chef wrote, "that running a business based on respect and kindness actually works better than running it through fear and intimidation. Who would have thought?" The letter stung because it confirmed what Marcus was slowly learning about himself. His aggressive, entitled approach to life hadn't been necessary for success. It had actually been holding him back from building something truly valuable. During his 3rd month of service, Marcus was assigned to help organize a community event honoring fallen soldiers. It would be held in the same square where he had made his terrible mistake, and many of the same families would be in attendance. "This is your chance to show that you've learned something," Corporal Mitchell told him. "But remember, this isn't about you proving yourself or getting forgiveness. This is about honoring people who deserve respect." As Marcus worked to set up chairs and decorate the memorial, he thought about how different this felt from his previous visit to the square. 3 months ago, he had seen only what was lacking, what didn't meet his standards. Now he saw a community, coming together to remember their heroes and support each other through grief. Elena arrived with the twins, who had grown comfortable with Marcus during his regular visits. They ran up to hug him, chattering excitedly in Spanish about the flowers they had brought for their father's memorial. As the ceremony began and families shared stories about their loved ones, Marcus felt something he had never experienced before: the deep satisfaction of being part of something larger than himself. He wasn't the center of attention or the most important person in the room. He was simply one person among many, contributing what he could to honor those who deserved remembrance. Marcus spent the following week in a state of deep reflection that was entirely foreign to him. For the first time in his adult life, he couldn't buy his way out of a problem or intimidate someone into backing down. He was forced to confront the person he had become and the trail of hurt he had left in his wake. Lieutenant Colonel Vega had arranged for him to receive letters from some of the people affected by his incident. The first came from Elena Santos, Sergeant Miguel's widow. Marcus had expected anger and condemnation, but instead found something far more powerful. "Mr. Sullivan," the letter began in careful English, "I do not write to punish you, but to help you understand. My husband Miguel believed that every person has the capacity for good, even those who make terrible mistakes. He would want me to show you the same compassion he showed others." She went on to describe Miguel's character, how he volunteered at local schools, helped elderly neighbors with their groceries, and always treated everyone with kindness regardless of their status. She explained that the memorial service wasn't just a military ceremony, but a community gathering where families found comfort and strength in honoring their loved ones. "When you took that rifle, you didn't just disrespect my husband's memory," Elena wrote. "You took away a moment of peace from grieving families. You turned our sacred time into a spectacle. But I believe people can change, Mr. Sullivan." Miguel believed that too. Marcus read the letter dozens of times, each reading making him feel smaller and more ashamed. Here was a woman who had lost everything, offering him forgiveness he didn't deserve and faith in his ability to become better. The second letter came from Captain Rodriguez himself. It was shorter, but equally impactful. "Mr. Sullivan, I have served in combat zones where I've seen the worst that people can do to each other, but I've also seen incredible acts of courage and kindness. The soldier whose rifle you grabbed, Sergeant Santos, once saved my life during an ambush. He didn't have to. He could have stayed in cover. But he risked everything to pull me to safety." The captain went on to explain that military discipline wasn't about punishment, but about creating people who could be trusted with life and death responsibilities. "When you casually reached for my weapon, you showed that you don't understand the weight of what we carry. These rifles aren't props or toys. They're tools that we use to protect innocent people, and every soldier knows that the power they represent must be respected." But it was the letter's conclusion that hit Marcus hardest. "I hope your time here helps you understand that true strength comes from serving others, not from taking what you want. Sergeant Santos understood that. Perhaps one day you will too." As the days passed, Marcus began to see his past behavior through a completely different lens. He remembered the restaurant employee he had fired for asking for time off to care for her sick child, the supplier he had bullied into accepting unfair contract terms, the countless small moments where he had chosen his own convenience over basic human decency. Sarah visited again, this time bringing news that their businesses were hemorrhaging money. "The staff are considering quitting en masse," she told him. "They're embarrassed to work for you. Some of them are saying they've been wanting to speak up about your treatment of employees for years, but were too afraid of losing their jobs. Maybe they should quit," Marcus said quietly, surprising his wife with his tone. "Maybe they deserve better than working for someone like me." Sarah studied her husband's face, seeing something there she hadn't witnessed in years. "Marcus, what's happening to you in here?" "I'm learning who I really am," he replied. "And I don't like what I see." That afternoon, Lieutenant Colonel Vega visited again, this time with an unexpected proposal. "Mr. Sullivan, I've been authorized to offer you an alternative to prosecution. It's unusual, but your case has attracted enough international attention that my superiors want to explore other options." Marcus looked up with the first hope he had felt since his arrest. "What kind of alternative?" community service. Specifically, you would spend 6 months working with military families who have lost loved ones. You would help maintain memorial sites, assist with community events, and listen to their stories. You would also be required to make substantial financial contributions to military family support organizations. It wasn't a get-out-of-jail-free card, Marcus realized. In some ways, it might be harder than prison. He would have to face the people he had hurt and try to make amends through actual service rather than just paying fines. There are conditions, Lieutenant Colonel Vega continued. You would remain under military supervision for the entire 6 months. You would live in basic quarters, not luxury accommodations. You would follow a strict schedule of service activities, and any attempt to treat this as a publicity stunt or business opportunity would result in immediate return to criminal prosecution. Marcus considered the offer carefully. 6 months of genuine service to others was completely outside his comfort zone. He had never done anything without expecting something in return, never helped anyone without calculating the benefit to himself. "Why are you offering this?" he asked. "Because Elena Santos requested it," Lieutenant Colonel Vega replied. "She believes that forcing you to truly understand the impact of military service and sacrifice might do more good than simply putting you in prison. She thinks you might become someone who could actually help other families going through what she has experienced." The fact that Miguel's widow had advocated for his opportunity at redemption made Marcus feel even more unworthy of the offer. "What if I fail? What if I can't change?" "Then you'll go to prison for the full 15 years, she said matter-of-factly. But Elena Santos believes in second chances even for people who haven't earned them. The question is whether you believe in yourself enough to try. Marcus thought about his comfortable life back home, his expensive restaurants, and his social status. Then he thought about Sergeant Miguel Santos, who had given up everything to save others. He thought about Elena, raising twin daughters alone while still finding compassion for a stranger who had hurt her. "I'll do it," he said finally. "I'll try to become someone worthy of their forgiveness." Lieutenant Colonel Vega nodded approvingly. "Your service begins tomorrow at dawn. And Mr. Sullivan, this is your last chance to prove that you're more than just a selfish, entitled tourist. Don't waste it." The military detention facility was nothing like the luxury resorts Marcus was accustomed to. The concrete walls were bare and cold, and the single window in his cell looked out onto a courtyard where soldiers conducted training exercises. For the first time in decades, Marcus found himself completely powerless, stripped of all the privileges his wealth had always provided. He sat on the narrow cot, staring at his hands and replaying the events that had led him here. The confident businessman, who had stepped off the cruise ship just hours earlier, felt like a different person entirely. The reality of potentially facing years in a foreign military prison was crushing his spirit in ways he had never imagined possible. Sarah had been allowed one brief visit, during which she delivered news that made Marcus's situation even worse. The story had gone viral on social media, with multiple videos of the incident shared thousands of times. The headlines were brutal. "Arrogant American tourist attacks soldier at memorial service," and "Entitled businessman shows ultimate disrespect to fallen heroes." "The videos make it look even worse than it was," Sarah had told him, tears in her eyes. "People are calling for you to be prosecuted to the full extent of the law. Some are even saying you should be banned from ever traveling abroad again." Marcus had watched helplessly as his reputation crumbled in real time. His restaurant businesses were already feeling the backlash, with customers canceling reservations and employees expressing shame about working for him. The comfortable life he had built through years of aggressive business tactics was falling apart because of one moment of incredible stupidity. Lieutenant Colonel Maria Vega, the military prosecutor, assigned to his case, had visited him the previous day. She was a serious woman in her 40s with intelligent eyes and an air of absolute competence. Unlike the tourist-facing staff Marcus was used to dealing with, she showed no interest in his wealth or American citizenship. "Mr. Sullivan, you are facing charges of interference with military operations, attempted theft of military property, and disrespect of a national memorial," she had explained in perfect English. "These are serious crimes in our country. punishable by up to 15 years in military prison. 15 years. The number echoed in Marcus's mind constantly. He would be nearly 60 when he got out, assuming he survived that long in military prison. His businesses would be gone, his marriage probably over, and his reputation destroyed beyond repair. All because he couldn't resist the urge to treat foreign soldiers like props for his social media posts. On his third day in detention, Marcus was brought to an interrogation room where Lieutenant Colonel Vega waited with a thick file of documents. She gestured for him to sit across from her at a metal table that had seen countless similar conversations. "I've been reviewing your case, Mr. Sullivan," she began, opening the file. "What interests me most is not just what you did, but how you've responded since your arrest." Marcus straightened slightly, hoping this might be leading somewhere positive. "I've been thinking a lot about what happened. I know I made a mistake." "A mistake?" Lieutenant Colonel Vega raised an eyebrow. "Is that how you characterize attempting to seize a loaded weapon from a soldier during a memorial service?" The word choice stung because Marcus realized he was still trying to minimize his actions. Even facing serious prison time, his instinct was to downplay rather than take full responsibility. "I've been reading about your business practices," she continued, pulling out several printed articles. "Multiple lawsuits from former employees alleging workplace harassment, health code violations at your restaurants that you fought rather than corrected. A pattern of treating people as obstacles to your success rather than human beings deserving respect." Marcus felt his face flush. That's just business. Sometimes you have to be tough to succeed." "Is it?" Lieutenant Colonel Vega leaned back in her chair. "Because from where I sit, it looks like a pattern of believing that rules don't apply to you, that other people exist solely for your benefit, that your wants are more important than everyone else's rights." The accuracy of her assessment was uncomfortable, but Marcus couldn't deny it. He had built his success on the belief that being aggressive and dismissive of others was just being smart and efficient. The idea that this mindset might be fundamentally wrong had never occurred to him. "Mr. Sullivan, I want to tell you about Sergeant Miguel Santos, the soldier whose memorial you disrupted." She pulled out a photograph of a young man in military dress uniform. He was 24 years old when he died. A husband and father of twin daughters who were only 2 years old. Marcus looked at the photo and felt something crack inside his chest. The young soldier had kind eyes and a genuine smile. He looked like someone who would have been friendly and helpful, the kind of person Marcus typically ignored or dismissed in his daily life. "Sergeant Santos died protecting a village from armed militants," Lieutenant Colonel Vega continued. "He could have retreated to safety, but civilians were trapped in the crossfire. He chose to stay and fight, giving those families time to escape. He saved 17 people before he was killed." The weight of what Marcus had done hit him with full force. He hadn't just grabbed a rifle for a photo. He had disrespected the memory of a genuine hero, a man who had given everything for others while Marcus had spent his life taking whatever he could get. His widow, Elena, still brings their daughters to the memorial service every year, the Lieutenant Colonel said softly. "Those little girls, now 5 years old, place flowers on their father's name and listen to stories about his courage. They were in the crowd when you decided their father's sacrifice was less important than your social media post." Marcus buried his face in his hands, finally understanding the true scope of his actions. This wasn't about military protocol or legal technicalities. This was about human dignity, respect, and the sacred bond between a community and those who died protecting it. "I'm going to be sick," he whispered, and he meant it. The guilt was overwhelming, crushing him with the realization of how callous and selfish he had become. Lieutenant Colonel Vega watched him carefully, looking for signs of genuine remorse versus self-pity. "Mr. Sullivan, in my 20 years of military service, I've seen many people face consequences for their actions. Some learn from their mistakes and become better people. Others simply become more careful about getting caught." She leaned forward, her eyes intense. "The question now is which type of person you choose to be." The moment Marcus's hands touched the rifle, everything changed. Captain Rodriguez moved with lightning speed, his military training taking over completely. In one fluid motion, he secured the weapon while his free hand firmly gripped Marcus's wrist. "You have just committed a serious offense," the captain said, his voice ice-cold and professional. "Attempting to take a weapon from an active military personnel is considered an act of aggression in this country." Marcus's confident smile faltered as he found himself face to face with a soldier whose demeanor had transformed from patient to deadly serious. The other soldiers had moved into defensive positions, creating a protective circle around their captain and the tourist who had just made the worst decision of his vacation. Wait, Marcus stammered, finally beginning to grasp that he wasn't in control of this situation. "It was just for a photo. I didn't mean anything by it. Don't you guys have a sense of humor?" "Humor?" Captain Rodriguez's eyes narrowed. "Sir, you just attempted to seize a loaded military weapon during an official ceremony commemorating our fallen comrades. There is nothing humorous about your actions." The crowd in the square had grown larger, with locals and tourists alike staring at the unfolding scene. Many people were recording with their phones, though they maintained a respectful distance from the soldiers. The festive market atmosphere had completely disappeared, replaced by tension and concern. Sarah pushed through the crowd, tears streaming down her face. "Please, officers, I'm his wife. He didn't mean any harm. He just gets carried away sometimes. He's not a bad person, just thoughtless." One of the younger soldiers stepped forward and spoke to Captain Rodriguez in their native language. The captain nodded grimly and responded before turning back to Marcus, who was now visibly sweating. Despite the cool morning air, "Ma'am, your husband's intentions are irrelevant." The captain addressed Sarah while keeping his eyes on Marcus. "In this country, we take military security very seriously. What he has done is not a misunderstanding or cultural difference. It is a crime." Marcus's face had gone pale, but his arrogance hadn't completely disappeared. "Crime? That's ridiculous. I'm an American citizen. I have rights. You can't treat me like some common criminal over a simple mistake. Your nationality does not grant you immunity from our laws," Captain Rodriguez replied calmly. "And this was not a mistake. You were repeatedly asked to maintain distance. You were clearly told this was an official ceremony. You chose to ignore multiple warnings and physically take a weapon from a soldier." The reality of his situation was finally beginning to sink in for Marcus. He looked around desperately, as if expecting someone to intervene on his behalf. Instead, he saw faces filled with disapproval and shock. Even the other American tourists were shaking their heads in disbelief. "Look, I'll apologize, okay? I'm sorry. I didn't realize you guys were so sensitive about your ceremony thing." Marcus's voice cracked slightly as he tried to minimize his actions. Captain Rodriguez's expression hardened further. "Sensitive, sir? This ceremony honors soldiers who died defending our country, men and women who gave their lives for the freedom and safety of our people. Your casual dismissal of their sacrifice only makes your offense worse." An elderly local man approached cautiously and spoke to the captain in rapid, emotional tones. His weathered hands gestured toward a memorial plaque near the soldier's position. The captain listened respectfully before nodding. "This gentleman wishes you to know that his son's name is on that memorial," the captain translated for Marcus. "Sergeant Miguel Santos, killed in action 3 years ago at age 24. Today marks the anniversary of his death. This is not a tourist attraction or photo opportunity. This is sacred ground for our community." Marcus glanced at the memorial plaque for the first time, seeing the dozens of names etched in stone. Each name represented a life lost, a family devastated, a community forever changed. The weight of what he had interrupted began to settle on his shoulders like a heavy blanket. I didn't know," he whispered, his earlier bravado completely gone. "You didn't ask," Captain Rodriguez replied. "You assumed. You decided that your entertainment was more important than our dignity. You treated our ceremony like a theme park attraction and our memorial like a photo booth." Sarah stepped closer to her husband, seeing him truly humbled for the first time in years. "Marcus, tell them you understand. Tell them you're sorry for what you did." But Captain Rodriguez held up his hand. "Words are insufficient at this point, ma'am. Your husband's actions have consequences that extend beyond apologies. 2 military police officers had arrived on the scene, summoned by one of the soldiers. They spoke briefly with Captain Rodriguez, who provided a concise report of the incident. Marcus watched this exchange with growing panic, finally understanding that this was not going to be resolved with charm or money. "What happens now?" Sarah asked, her voice barely audible. "Your husband will be detained pending a formal investigation," one of the military police officers explained in accented but clear English. "Attempting to take a weapon from military personnel is a serious criminal offense. He will be processed through our military justice system." Marcus's legs nearly gave out. "Military justice system? But I'm a civilian, a tourist. This has to be some kind of mistake." "There is no mistake," the officer replied firmly. "When you put your hands on that rifle, you became subject to military law. Your civilian status does not protect you from the consequences of interfering with military operations." The crowd watched in stunned silence as the military police began the process of taking Marcus into custody. His expensive clothes and confident demeanor meant nothing now. He was just another person who had made a terrible decision and would face the consequences. "Please," Marcus begged, his voice breaking. "I have a business to run. Employees depending on me. I can't be stuck in some foreign military prison. There has to be another way." Captain Rodriguez's expression remained unmoved. "Perhaps you should have considered those responsibilities before you decided to treat our memorial service as your personal entertainment venue." Marcus Sullivan stepped off the cruise ship with his chest puffed out and designer sunglasses reflecting the Mediterranean sun. At 42, he owned 3 successful restaurants in Manhattan and never let anyone forget it. His expensive leather shoes clicked against the cobblestones of the small coastal town as he surveyed his surroundings with obvious disappointment. "This place looks like it hasn't been updated since the Stone Age," he muttered to his wife Sarah, who was busy taking photos of the charming old buildings. "I can't believe we paid premium prices for this dump." Sarah sighed quietly. She'd grown tired of Marcus's complaints during their 2-week vacation. Every destination had been beneath his standards. The hotels were too small, the food was too ethnic, and the locals didn't speak enough English. She had hoped this trip would help them reconnect, but Marcus seemed determined to find fault with everything. The town square buzzed with activity as locals prepared for their weekly market. Colorful stalls displayed fresh fruits, handmade crafts, and traditional clothing. Children played near a beautiful fountain while elderly men sat on benches sharing stories and playing chess. The atmosphere was peaceful and welcoming, exactly what Sarah had hoped for, but Marcus saw only what was missing. Where's the Starbucks? The McDonald's? How do these people even survive without proper amenities? He spoke loudly, not caring who might understand English around him. A young woman at a nearby fruit stand glanced over with a frown. She clearly understood every word, but Marcus was too self-absorbed to notice. He continued his critique, pointing at various aspects of the town with exaggerated disgust. "Look at that so-called restaurant," he said, gesturing toward a family-owned taverna with outdoor seating. "I bet they don't even have health inspections here. The whole place probably has rats." Sarah felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment. "Marcus, please keep your voice down. These people can probably understand you." "So what if they can? Maybe they'll learn something about running a proper business." He adjusted his expensive watch and looked around with the air of someone doing the locals a favor by visiting their town. As they walked deeper into the square, Marcus noticed a small group of soldiers near the town hall. They wore crisp uniforms and stood at attention, clearly part of some official ceremony or commemoration. Their presence added a dignified atmosphere to the square, and most tourists respectfully kept their distance while taking photos. But Marcus saw an opportunity for what he considered the perfect vacation photo. "Sarah, get your camera ready. I'm going to get a shot with those soldiers. This will be great for my social media." International businessman Marcus Sullivan touring European military installations. Sarah felt a knot form in her stomach. "Marcus, maybe we should just take pictures from here. They look like they're in the middle of something important." "Nonsense. They're probably bored out of their minds standing there. I'll brighten their day." Marcus straightened his polo shirt and walked confidently toward the soldiers. The lead soldier, a serious-looking man in his 30s named Captain Rodriguez, noticed Marcus approaching. His trained eyes immediately assessed the tourist: expensive clothes, arrogant posture, and the unmistakable attitude of someone who believed money could buy anything. "Excuse me, soldier," Marcus said loudly, completely ignoring proper protocol. "I want to take some pictures with you guys. This will be great publicity for your little town." Captain Rodriguez remained perfectly still, his expression neutral but alert. "Sir, we are conducting an official ceremony. Please maintain a respectful distance." Marcus laughed dismissively. "Come on, lighten up. I'm a successful American businessman. This kind of exposure could really help your tourism industry." He moved closer, completely ignoring the captain's clear boundaries. The other soldiers exchanged glances, but remained disciplined and professional. They had dealt with difficult tourists before. But something about Marcus's entitled attitude set off warning signals. "I insist that you step back, sir," Captain Rodriguez said firmly. "This is a solemn commemoration for fallen soldiers. We ask for your respect and understanding." But Marcus was already pulling out his phone, completely dismissing the captain's words. Yeah, very solemn. Now smile for the camera, boys. This is going straight to my Instagram followers." Sarah watched from a distance, her anxiety growing with each passing second. She could see the tension building in the soldiers' faces, even as they maintained their professional demeanor. Other tourists had started to notice the commotion, and she felt mortified by her husband's behavior. Marcus continued to ignore every social cue and direct request from the soldiers. He positioned himself right next to Captain Rodriguez, throwing his arm around the soldiers' shoulders as if they were old friends. "Perfect. This is exactly what I needed for my vacation album." The captain's jaw tightened, but his training kept him from reacting. He gently but firmly removed Marcus's arm from his shoulder. "Sir, for the final time, I must ask you to step away. You are disrupting an official military ceremony." "Official military ceremony?" Marcus scoffed. "You guys are just standing around in costumes. Don't take yourselves so seriously." He noticed the rifle slung across the captain's shoulder, and his eyes lit up with excitement. "Now that's what I'm talking about. Let me hold that rifle for a picture. My buddies back home will never believe this." Without waiting for permission, Marcus reached for the weapon. The entire square seemed to freeze. Captain Rodriguez's hand instinctively moved to protect his rifle, but Marcus had already grabbed it with both hands. The other soldiers immediately tensed, their training kicking in as they assessed the sudden threat. "Sir, release the weapon immediately," Captain Rodriguez commanded, his voice sharp with authority. But Marcus was too intoxicated by his own perceived cleverness to understand the gravity of what he had just done. He held the rifle awkwardly, grinning widely as he tried to pose for a selfie. "This is perfect. Wait until the guys at the country club see this." The crowd around them began to murmur and step back, sensing that something had gone very wrong. Sarah covered her face with her hands, knowing that her husband had just crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed.